evangelism this quarter and trying to motivate us to be more evangelistic in our efforts, to realize this is a personal responsibility, not just a pastoral responsibility, if you will. This is a personal responsibility that we share the gospel with other people and that we be open about those things. And so, today, what we want to think about is just the importance of awareness and realizing your mission field. The reason I have this lesson is because I think sometimes we can get fooled into thinking that if we're not preaching gospel meetings or going overseas and preaching in different countries, then we just can't really do evangelism. And that is just a huge misconception. We can do evangelism. You don't have to go overseas. You don't even have to go out of state. You don't even have to go out of city. You can do evangelism right here, where you're at, right now, all the time. And we need to have more of the mindset of evangelizing in that way. So that's what we want to think about here today. A little bit of this is going to be review. We're mentioning a couple things today that we got into a little bit last week. And so I want to focus more on the back half of this lesson than the front half of this lesson today. But I want to start with this question: is there a need? I thought this was an interesting quote that I just saw. It's an older quote, but it said, if you were to put into a line those people who are without Christ, the line would be 750,000 miles long, could circle the earth 30 times, and it grows 20 miles longer each day. Is there a need? Is there a need for us to share the gospel of Christ with people? I think there is. And we need to make sure that we're sharing it. So I want to take a look at John chapter 4. We started to look at this last week, did look at it a little bit. I want to start with verses 35 through 42. Jesus here has spoken to the woman at the well. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But in verse 35 it says, do you not say, there are yet 4 months, and then comes the harvest? Look, I tell you, lift up your eyes and see that the fields are white for harvest. I was talking to his disciples here when he makes this statement in John chapter 4. And they are, he contrasts the physical harvest, which is 4 months away, contrasts that with the spiritual harvest. And he's basically indicating is happening right now. And so he says, see that the fields are white for harvest. They're ready to be harvested. It says in verse 36, already the one who reaps is receiving wages and gathering fruit for eternal life, so that sower and reaper may rejoice together. For here the saying holds true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you did not labor. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labor. It goes on to say, many Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. And I think that's the harvest right there. All these Samaritans from this town, where this one woman went back and talked to him about how she had found the Messiah, and they believed in him because of the woman's testimony. And all she said was this, he told me all that I ever did. And so when the Samaritans came to him, they asked him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. And many more believed because of his word. And they said to the woman, it is no longer because of what you said that we believe, for we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this is indeed the Savior of the world. All right. Where was Jesus here as you think about John chapter 4? Remind ourselves where he's at.
Jacob's well in Samaria with a woman.
Okay, he's near Jacob's well in Samaria, and he's talking to a woman. What characteristics of this individual may have kept Jesus or others from attempting to teach her? What are some things about her that perhaps people...
Did Jews and Samaritans not get along?
That's right. Yeah, the Jews and Samaritans did not get along, and so the fact she was a Samaritan, that was somebody that was considered kind of a half-Jew, not that serious about their Judaism, and so the Jews and Samaritans often avoided one another. And she notes that here in this context. Why are you talking to me? In verse 9, The woman of Samaria said, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews, this is John's comment on it, Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. They normally just gave each other the cold shoulder, walked on by, didn't want to talk. So she's a Samaritan, number one. What else about her? She'd been with many men, so she's an adulterous woman. She's got an adulterous history. And well, that'd be one thing. She was a sinful woman, had a sinful past, clearly. Sinful present at that. She was with a man that was not her husband. She'd already had 5 husbands, Jesus points out. All right, there's one more thing.
I mean, generally, the fact men didn't generally stop and talk to other women like that, just the other sex in that society.
No. Just the fact she was a woman. Sometimes men didn't talk to women, women didn't talk to men, so that was different as well. Jesus really breaking barriers here, and that's the point we want to make. Sometimes if we want to really teach lost people, then you're going to have to reach out to people that perhaps you haven't ordinarily talked to, and break some barriers, build some bridges with them. Where were Jesus and his disciples headed at this point? You look at verse 3 and 4.
Galilee.
They were on their way to Galilee. They had left Judea and they departed again to Galilee. But he needed to go, and I think that's an interesting comment there in verse 4. He needed to go through Samaria. Normally they avoided the area completely. But it says Jesus needed to go through Samaria, perhaps to make this very point, that Samaritans need the gospel too. This woman needs the gospel too. This sinful woman needs the gospel too. So he didn't avoid the area. There's going to be some places that you might be tempted to avoid, some people you might be tempted not to teach, but what he's trying to make a point here. There are people who you might be tempted not to teach and to avoid that need teaching, so don't avoid it. So why might the minds of his disciples have not been focused upon teaching anyone in Samaria? Well, verse 9, I think, gives you the answers, right? They normally had no dealings with Samaria. It's just, we just thought we were going to go back up to Galilee and go back to teaching there because I didn't think the Samaritans were really worth our time. We normally don't talk to one another. Now, while the disciples might have been looking ahead at their potential stops on their journey, where does Jesus say they should be looking when you look at verse 35? Look around right here. Right here. You should be looking. The fields are white right now, right here, in this place, and at this time. And you guys are thinking about Galilee down the road somewhere else, and not thinking about the opportunities that are right in front of you at this moment. And so, question 4 kind of makes this point. The apostles were looking to teach in a different place, Galilee, at a different time, whenever they got there down the road, to a different people, Jews. And Jesus taught them that they were, where they were was the right place, right there in Samaria. Now was the right time, right with this sinful woman and all these Samaritans asking questions. And the Samaritans were the right people because they needed to know about the Messiah as much as anybody. So what can you do right here, right now, to help evangelize and disciple others? I think that's the key question that we need to be asking. There are people in your network of friends and coworkers, neighbors, community organizations, just the people that you're around on a daily basis where God has given you opportunities to talk to them about spiritual things. And sometimes we're thinking about, well, we'll have to wait. We'll invite them and we'll get them to come to church. Or when we have a gospel meeting, 2 months from now, we'll invite them to that. We'll get them in there. And we keep thinking down the road, somewhere else, some other time. And what Jesus, I think, is teaching us, you can evangelize anywhere, anytime, everywhere is a great place to talk to people about spiritual things when that door of opportunity opens. Don't let it pass by. We've got opportunities all the time. And Jesus, I think, is trying to show us that. All right, consider an example here. Consider an example. Which is easier as a salesman? Right? So put your salesman shoes on. I don't want to, I hate to kind of mix and act like the church is a business. So I'm a little hesitant to use this illustration, but I do want you to think about it. Which is easier as a salesman? Is it easier to go door to door and cold call upon new customers. You have people around here that do that? Do you have vacuum cleaner people down here? Because we had them up in Indiana. I haven't had anybody come to my house trying to sell me vacuums, but people trying to sell Kirby vacuum cleaners, they were all the time coming to my door. And they were tough. What they would do, they would hand you a thing of paper towels, and if you took it, they stepped into your door. That was like permission to come in. I was like, whoa, 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 I wanted the paper towels. I didn't want you. I mean, I thought you were just giving me some paper towels. But, Kirby salesman, but I get it. It's a tough job because you get a lot of doors slammed in your face and people who don't want you there. And then people who get on Facebook and say, watch out, the Kirby door, the Kirby vacuum guy's in town. He's selling something. It's tough. Is it easier to be that guy going door to door and cold calling upon new customers, or working in a retail store, a vacuum cleaner store, and people come to your place, walk into your building because they need a vacuum cleaner and they're looking for one? Which one is easier? Which one's kind of an easier sale, if you will, when you think about those two? Retail store, yeah. Kind of an obvious answer to that question, right? It's just a little bit easier. That doesn't mean it can't be done knocking on doors, because they wouldn't do it probably if they weren't making some sales doing that too. But it's probably a little bit easier when people are walking right through your doors. So what would you think of a salesman, and what do you think? I mean, you guys probably walk in stores and have had this experience where you walk in and you're wanting something and nobody greets you, nobody says hello to you, nobody says, can I help you? Are you interested in something? What would you think if you walked in that store? What's your impression?
They don't get a commission.
You must not get a commission, okay? Yeah. Must not matter if you make the sale or not. Okay. Interesting. Do you sometimes feel like, well, I'll just take my business somewhere else? Have a little bit of that mentality? I'll just go somewhere that wants me to be here, that shows interest in me. Now, what about a church? When I talk about your mission field, let's just talk about the church itself. When we have our Bible studies and worship assemblies and things like that, and we do invite just the general public, as long as you're one to come in here and study and worship along and not protest, then as long as you're willing to do that, we welcome you to come on in and study right along with us. So what about a church, though? You've got people who do walk in, which takes some courage to walk into a place where you don't know anybody. Maybe you've never been there before, but you're looking for some spiritual guidance and you're looking for some help and you want somebody to talk to you about Jesus. And you walk in and people just turn around and stare at you in your seat. Don't come up and talk to you. Don't say hi, it was good to have you. And I'll tell you, I've walked into a lot of churches like that, where nobody's friendly. Now, I think it's a pretty friendly group, and I think we do a pretty good job of that. But I'm going to say, I just want to remind you, that's your mission field. That's an opportunity. When somebody who's unchurched, or maybe you may not have any idea what church they come from, or if they go to church, if they've ever been in a church, but they come in the back door, and you have an opportunity to greet them, welcome them, befriend them. That's a huge opportunity. And God's giving you an open door just right there. And I think churches have to make sure they follow up on that. People who come through our doors. Now, most Sundays, we have multiple visitors. Now, some of those are traveling. I will say this about visitors here in this congregation compared to anywhere I've been. And I think I've made this point, that we have less visitors here than probably any church I've preached at. That might sound crazy, but we do. We have less visitors here. Now, I think there's reasons for that. I think this area is saturated with churches. There's churches everywhere, and we didn't have as many churches in place where I was, so we had less options for people to go. Definitely, when I was in Anderson, Indiana, there was 3 churches of Christ in the whole city. It's not like this, okay? They're everywhere. Okay, so there's a lot of options, and I think that's perhaps why you might have a little less visitors. When I was in Columbus, Ohio, probably 25 visitors every week coming through the doors. We were right off I-270, right at a major intersection. we were a great location. We had a whole lot of visitors that were coming in all the time. So, but we got visitors. We still got visitors that come in here. Some traveling, some new to the area. We got new college kids that show up right around August, September, October. They'll float in here looking, sometimes with their families. They come to check things out, things like that. Sometimes it's just friends and family. Sometimes you guys bring your friends, your family, or people that came to visit you in town. You say, come to church with me on Sunday. And they come with you. But they walk through our doors during our assemblies. Now, if this church were to add 2 new visitors to our number weekly. So you take, let's say you got 5, 10 visitors every week, and you added 2 of those every week over the course of a 52-week year, then how many new people would you add in a year? There you go. Very precise. 104. Yeah. So we need to be doing something with the people who walk through the doors. And trying to welcome them, trying to teach them, and trying to build them up in the Lord. That's what I would call the low-hanging fruit of churches, of evangelism. People that we should be reaching out, and sometimes they walk in, nobody talks to them, they walk out and they say, I'm going to go do my business somewhere else. It's not business, but I'm going to seek my spiritual help from somewhere else because people didn't act like they're interested. Jesus says to us, take a look right now. Look right around you and think about, is there somebody here that you can encourage and you can build up and you can work with? So what does Jesus say that we can do also right now, which will lead to others to glorify your Father in heaven? We're talking outside the church building at this point. But I just want you to think about in the church building, you have just easy opportunities that walk in sometimes all the time that we need to follow up on. And by the way, I'm going to mention this too. One of Mel's jobs now, all right, is to collect those visitors' cards. That's one of the reasons we mention that every service, so that we can follow up with people who are here, and so he can follow up people who are here. And so I appreciate Mel for doing that. I want to remind you that that's the purpose of that. We want to follow up with people and let them know we're glad you're here and what can we do to help. All right. What's Jesus say we can do which will lead others to glorify your Father in heaven? Matthew chapter 5, verse 16.
Let your light shine.
Let your light so shine that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. So what are some good works we can do for others? Have you ever done good works and it opened a door of opportunity? Among your next door neighbors in your own neighborhoods, what are some good works you can do that might just, and you're not really doing it because I'm trying to use this to manipulate people into having a Bible study with me. You're doing it because you're supposed to be people to do good works. But what it does is it opens up doors of opportunity when you are a person of good works. And it makes people want to ask questions. I'll give you an example of that. When I was in Anderson, where I was before I moved here, they were really good about moving people. I'm going to tell you, when somebody was moving, the whole church showed up. The whole church showed up. And people moved a lot. I don't know what was going on there, but we were moving like every couple months, somebody. And but everybody showed up. We were in one neighborhood one day, cars lined up all up and down the neighborhood. Everybody's out of their cars. They're helping people unload the truck, move stuff. And we had a couple people pull over and say, what's going on? Well, nothing. Just churches here, just helping somebody move. Where do you go to church? Because that's the kind of church I want to be a part of, where people are helping one another out. It makes a big impression when people show up to help people out. And so these are just simple things you can do among your next door neighbors in your own neighborhoods. Just be somebody who's there to help. And sometimes they want to know about the God you serve. It can open doors of opportunities. What about before, during, and after the assemblies of the local church with visitors? What are some good works we can do for others? I mentioned a couple of them. There you go. Hospitality. I think there's a reason why hospitality is a wonderful thing. What it says is, I care about you. I'd like to get to know you better. you're someone that I've never seen, and you're in town, and you don't have anywhere to eat, maybe if you're traveling out of town, or you don't have any friends here, maybe we could get to know each other on more of a personal level outside of the church building over some lunch. Invite somebody out to lunch. That's something you can do, and you'll get to know people on a deeper level when you have those kinds of relationships. Before, I guess I would just say greet them. We had a whole greeters course when I first moved here where we try to encourage people to make sure we're greeting and talking to people. The Bible mentions the word greet dozens of times in the New Testament. Greet one another, greet one another, greet one another, greet one another, over and over again. It's not an option, it's a command. Greet one another. And when you go overseas, a lot of the places that you will go, I think if you were to talk to Ed about places you'll go, you will get greeted very warmly. Sloppy kisses, handshakes, hugs. You know, they are just so happy when you walk through the door. When I go down to Barbados, because I've been there three or four times, I don't know now, but I mean, they got a smile on their face. They are hugging you. They are so glad to see you. They remember details about you that you forgot you told them, a year or two ago. And you are warmly greeted. And that it means a lot to be greeted, to be welcomed. All right, with our coworkers, whom we see on a regular basis. There's some good works we can do.
Engage in their lives, be interested in what's going on in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I was just talking to a coworker the other day. They were saying they went to church for years, and the people in their own Bible class didn't know their name. And so, just like getting to know the person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Get to know people on a personal level, and just be interested in their family and what's going on in their family, in their life, and what are some of the trials that they're facing. And when you're actually interested in people, having conversations with people, you don't always have to preach sermon, quote scripture to people. Be interested in their lives, and then what you'll find is you'll start to have opportunities to share certain scriptures with one another that help us get through those situations in our lives. And you'll have doors of opportunity just by being interested. People don't care what you know until they know you care, right? There's that old quote. There's a lot of truth to that. People don't care what you know until they know you care. Show that you care. Be interested in the people that you work with, and you'll start to see doors of opportunity open up. What are our classmates or teammates at school, sports, activities? I don't know. Does anybody in here have classmates anymore? We're kind of the old people out here, aren't we? They're all in there. People I should be asking that question to. But you should be talking to your kids, your grandkids about this. Be a person of good works. Be the person who helps the coach out, who doesn't tear the coach down. You want to make sure your coach that ever comes to church, tear him down about what a terrible coach he is every single week and how your kids not getting enough playing time. I promise you, he won't show up. He won't show up. Be a decent person. You want your waitress to come to church? Well, tip her, first of all, and actually show your appreciation for her. But don't be cranky and complaining and tearing her down and embarrassing her in front of everybody. Be a decent person and treat her like a human being with some dignity. You want to be somebody that does good works. Be the person that shows up early to your kids' practice and stays up late and picks up the trash and the water bottles that are sitting around and volunteer to help do something that needs done. People see things like that, and I think it opens doors with our friends. Those are simple good works we can do that say something about who we serve and that we're people who serve.
Work is probably the best place most of us have to get out to be a good example, be different.
Mm-hmm.
Show respect to your boss, show respect to your coworkers, show respect to your customers. Stay out of the gossip. Try to stop it if you can.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that go on in the workplace that be different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yeah, let your language be different. Your behavior. Don't act like they act, but don't be condescending, but just act like you should. And it'll open up doors eventually. People see that. People see that at work and at your various sports. Yeah.
I think it's important, like you said, to get to know people, showing interest in them, but try to also put in some spiritual things. And I don't know you necessarily telling them, but asking them, hey, you can, one thing I like to do is say, hey, you study the Bible or anything? You got anything you read? And I'm surprised at how many people read Bibles read now, or read some type of spiritual type literature, and you let them talk for a while. Sometimes it gets them mentioning something that's worth talking about, and try to not just getting to know people, but try to make it partly spiritual if you can.
Yeah. That's a great point. That's a great question. What are you reading lately? What you reading about? What have you been listening to? That can stir up some good questions. I said something earlier too about try to make sure that you're not being a jerk to your kid's coach. I will say at work, do you ever have a bad day at work? And maybe you are frustrated and you didn't act like you should, to be the person that apologizes, that comes in later that night or the next day and says, you know what, guys, yesterday I was really frustrated and I kind of lost it and I was overly critical, whatever it was. And I shouldn't have acted like that, and I want to apologize and ask you guys to forgive me. Wow. Be that person every once in a while who's just humble enough to admit, I didn't do right yesterday, and I do need to make that right. That can say a lot about you as well, because you know you're not perfect, and sometimes we could behave a little bit better. All right, now, Jessica, go ahead.
I think we also need to be good listeners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Jesus asks great questions, and then he listens. That's a great point. We're going to get into that probably next quarter a little bit when we start talking about tactics and things like that. Talk a little bit about listening and the right questions. We're going to get into that for sure a lot next quarter. But if Jesus, I do want to make this point, because it's not just about being a good example. If Jesus had just tried to be a good example with the woman at the well, so he goes, he sits on this well, and he draws up his own water, and he says, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and just kind of minds his own business and treats her respectfully and then goes his own way. Would that have been enough to teach her what she needed to know? So I want to make the point, yes, be a good example, but at some point we do have to open our mouths and talk to people about things that matter concerning their spiritual lives. And so he was willing to speak, to reveal the truth there. So you look at John chapter 4 and verse 7, he says, give me a drink, verse 7. Look at verse 10, keep walking through here. If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. He's starting to reveal himself to her. In verse 13, whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. The water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water, springing up in everlasting life. Then in verse 16, he begins to tell her, go call your husband, tell him to come here. She says, I don't have a husband. He said, you've said I have no husband. You've had 5 husbands. So he's telling her all that she ever did, as she stated later in the text. So he's revealing himself and who he is. And then in verse 21, she starts to ask that spiritual question. She says, you guys say we're supposed to worship in Jerusalem, and we worship here at this mountain. Tell me about that. I've heard that this is some religious debate. And so he gets into that a little bit. It's not going to matter one day where you worship. It's going to matter who you worship, that you worship the Son and that you worship him in spirit and in truth as you continue through John chapter 4. But he's speaking. He's telling her things. He's revealing things. He's answering questions. So, yes, be a good example. But at some point, we've got to be ready to share the gospel and try to share truth and impart it slowly. Okay? John 4, then, I think, is a powerful text about soul winning. And there's some great lessons in it. Number 1, Jesus found common ground and sparked a conversation in everyday activities. He's just sitting by the well, where people came, people were, and he used it as an opportunity to open up a conversation. It might be the water cooler at work, it might be the grocery store line, who knows? It might be you just sitting on the bleachers watching a kids or grandkids ball game, but get around people and try to stir up meaningful conversations. He also didn't let racial or political or moral differences get in the way. Didn't matter that she was a female, didn't matter that she was a Samaritan, didn't matter that she was an adulteress. She was a soul. And we need to see people as souls, not think about race, gender, or even sin, background, or tradition. This is a soul, and a soul who needs to hear the gospel, and think of people in that way. He takes the focus off the woman or physical things, makes her think spiritually. His mind is on a whole nother level. He's thinking about things on high, not thinking about things of this earth. And he wants to take her mind there. So he can contrast physical water to spiritual water, physical bread to the bread of life. And Jesus listened to her. Jessica pointed that out. 40% of the conversation is the words of the woman. He doesn't just lecture, he listens. So he takes the time to listen to her and know where she's at. He focused on salvation even after she threw a little snarky jab in verses 11 through 14. Tell me where you get this living water, sir. She's being a little snarky, and he just goes ahead and doesn't let that detour him, doesn't get all offended, and doesn't get all high and mighty with her. He could have, because he was the high and mighty, but he doesn't. And it's so easy for us when people throw those jabs and start to contest, start to push back a little bit. It's easy for us to get tied up in detours, to chase rabbits, to get sidetracked on other random subjects. It's important for us to focus on the things that matter. And then he finishes in a definitive way. He points out the sin in the woman's life. If you look at verses 16 through 18, I know you've had 5 husbands. So he's not afraid to just say, there's something that you need to talk about. You need to confront. And I know about it. And he points it out, and he still offers her that hope. Some door-opening questions. Here's a couple. This is something that Mel brought up, but I would just mention a couple questions. At some point, if you really want to get onto a spiritual topic, instead of asking the boring questions, how's the weather, what did you think about the game, the questions that everybody asks, what did you do last night, how about this every once in a while? How are you and the Lord doing? And just sit and wait. And are you happy with how your life is going? Think about those 2 questions. And those questions will cut a little bit deeper. And perhaps we'll open a door to a little bit more of a conversation with people that we want to get to know and that we are trying to open some doors with. Really start talking about meaningful things. All right. Is the local assembly a place for visitors? I say yes. Thank you. Yes, James 2 talked about if a visitor comes into your midst and you see one who's dressed this way and you're real friendly to him, and you see another one who's dressed this way and you kind of make him sit in the back and, here, sit at my footstool. He says you become judges of evil thoughts and you're showing partiality. So I want to kind of finish with this point. And that is, we've got to be really careful to avoid, as visitors come into our midst, that type of partiality. And so be careful that we're not showing partiality when we speak to the well-dressed visitors and we ignore those who are dressed otherwise. Don't show partiality when you speak to the visitors who have your same gender and ignore those of the opposite gender. I'll give you a little illustration of that. When I was in Ohio, we had some ladies, great people, but they would stand right there in the lobby, talking to one another, chatting about whatever for the week, and great people. And if a woman walked in, they would talk to them. If a man walked in, they would never even say hi. And there'd be visitors walking in all the time, and you got these 3-4 women talking, and they don't ever say hello to them. I don't know if this is because they felt weird about saying hi to a man or what. Say hi. Doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. If somebody walks by, follow the 5-foot rule. If they're within 5 feet of me, I'm going to say hello to them. How are you doing? Let me introduce myself. Okay? Don't show partiality because of gender. Make sure that you are paying attention to people who are standing there by themselves, the lone sheep, and not just focusing on your friends every service and the people you normally talk to. And perhaps consider some rules to help us practice the golden rule and treat other people the way we'd want to be treated if we were a visitor walking into their midst. So we've got to open our eyes sometimes. Look at the opportunities are right here. All right, thank you for your attention. I'll leave the last couple points up here.